Who wants this trade deal more, and can they resolve the differences?
Great to see you this morning. Both sides believe that they have time on their side, and both sides believe that their respective economies can withstand additional pressure. The U.S. is coming off very strong Q1 growth, and China, for its part, has seen some success with its stimulus measures from earlier this year. So essentially, a lot of the talk that we've seen since Liu He first agreed to the concessions in late February, a lot of positive market talk. But in reality, I think what we're seeing here is the underlying negotiations have been much more contentious than we had anticipated. And for that, Francine, you really have to look at what was negotiated. You had a 150-page document, 7 chapters, written in English. And for some of the negotiators, they have described that language as fairly broad brush strokes. So this is a perfect opportunity for Beijing to go back, take a look at that language, translate it into Chinese, and then come to Washington and say, you know, we need to re-clarify what we meant in certain chapters or with certain key provisions. And that's essentially where we are now.
But Meredith, overall, how should President Trump deal with the Chinese, right? If he backs them in a corner, is it going to backfire?
Certainly, I think we should anticipate that the president will move forward with tariffs this Friday. He's given the Chinese a very small window to come to the table with what Beijing would consider to be large concessions. Reportedly, Liu He is going to be arriving in Washington on Thursday, with a much smaller delegation than he had planned. And that's actually bad news, Tom. The president is also giving Liu He just about 24 hours to come up with some major wins for the U.S. side.
Right.
We just don't see Xi Jinping as authorizing Liu to move in that way.
Well, I'm thrilled you're here, Meredith. I consider this the interview of the day on all this trade stuff. You sat with 2 ambassadors at number 55. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Willem, help me here. Anjiao Lu Beijing 10060. You sit in a room there, and you've got to tell ambassadors or the president or Mr. Lighthizer how the Chinese will react. Your expertise is the Chinese behavior. 24 hours in an aggressive bullying approach by the President of the United States. It's unprecedented. Am I right?
Unprecedented at a certain time when you have to understand, currently we're in the middle of some very politically sensitive dates for the Chinese. You have the May 4th student movement. You also have June 4th coming up. And so Xi Jinping cannot be seen to capitulate to U.S. demands during this sensitive time.
Well, you mentioned the remit. The gentleman is coming from Beijing with a reduced team, and he has, and I've said this all week, and this from Elizabeth Economy as well, at the Council on Foreign Relations. Who's got who's back in Beijing while they're getting tweets from the president?
Who's got who's back? Who's got Liu He's back?
Who's got the president's back? Who's got Mr. Who's back? Who's got, you know, the 40 people coming over or whatever? The mystery here on the Chinese side is dramatic to me.
So, Tom, this is really Chinese diplomacy. You know, you think you're getting somewhere with the Chinese, and at the very last minute, they'll come back and say, actually, what we had agreed to, we need to take another look at that. So Washington is having to deal with that. The president's approach to dealing with that is pretty unorthodox, and Beijing is dealing with that now. But look, we've got 2 strong personalities. You have President Trump on one side, Xi Jinping on the other, and both men are fairly confident that they will win out in the end. And what it comes down to is it's going to be market pressure on one or the other economies that's going to force the hand. What we see happening now is a likely continued extension of trade negotiations, a delay of any deal, perhaps even into 2020, depending upon how this latest bout works out.
I was going to ask you actually about market pressures, Meredith. How will this play out on the Chinese economy?
Well, the U.S. president is pointing to the negative fallout for the Chinese stock exchanges as evidence that this is going to put Xi Jinping in a difficult place. But as we know, the stock exchanges in China don't really have as much of a direct connection to the viability of the workings of the Chinese economy. So essentially, I think Beijing is going to continue to take certain measures to continue to ease its economy and manage these pressures over the medium term.